Okay, hello there. Today's homework on Tuesday is going to be finding x-intercepts, which the directions in the homework do not, let's see what they specifically say. They specifically say find the x-intercepts of the equation, so that's pretty straightforward. Find the x-intercepts, but there's a lot of different ways to say that. They might say find the solutions, or find the zeros, or find the roots. Okay, that all means the exact same thing. It means find the x-intercepts. What does x have to be so that y equals 0? And that could be worded as find the x-intercepts, find the solutions, find the roots, or find the zeros. So if you see any one of those four things, it means do this if you can't factor. And all the problems aren't going to factor nicely that you have for homework on Tuesday. So here's an example of what one of the problems might look like. 4x squared plus 8x minus 1. Now, I wrote down what the quadratic equation, the standard form here is. Oops. ax squared plus bx plus c. And then I wrote down the crazy formula for you to use, the negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then I, on the side, wrote down what a, b, and c are. It's 4, positive 8, and negative 1. So here I substituted those into the equation, and negative 8 goes in for b, 4 goes in for a, and negative 1 goes in for c. And then I did the math inside the square root symbol, so 8 squared is 64. And now this is plus 16, so this is a common mistake here. People want to write minus 16 because it says minus 4ac. Well, what that means is this is a negative 4, basically. So you have a negative 4 times a times c. And c is a negative 1, so a negative times a negative is a positive. That's why it's plus 16. So now you get the square root of 80, which yesterday I tried to explain how to break down the square root of 48. Now today I'm going to show you two different ways how to do that. So method number 1 over here is the fastest way to do it. And the fastest way to break down a square root is to find the biggest perfect square that is a factor of that number. So a perfect square is 4, that's 2 squared, or 9, that's 3 squared, or 16, that's 4 squared, 25, 36, 49, so on and so forth. So the biggest perfect square that goes into 80 is 16, and it goes in there 5 times. So it's the square root of 16 times the square root of 5, and the square root of 16 is 4. So your answer is just 4 square root 5, because that's all that's left. Square root of 5 doesn't break down any farther. That's kind of sloppy writing, but the answer is 4 square root 5. Now, this is the long way, but that doesn't mean it's more difficult. This makes more sense to a lot of students, so if you want to do it this way, go ahead. And this way, you don't have to look for the biggest perfect square that goes into 80. You can look for the smallest number that goes into 80, which the smallest number would be 2. So just keep splitting this in half every time. 2 times 40, 2 times 20, 2 times 10, 2 times 5. And now you're left with 4 square root of 2's. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a square root of 5. That's the prime factorization of 80. If you multiply those 5 numbers together, you're back to 80. Now what we have is an answer that's going to have a square root symbol with numbers inside of it and whole numbers outside of it. So basically, for every 2 numbers that you have that are the same, like these 2 square root of 2's right here, that would be square root of 2 times square root of 2, which is just the whole number 2. All right, then you've got another square root of 2 times the square root of 2, which is another whole number 2. And then on the inside, all we have left is a 5. That's the only number we have left here that I circled originally. You can't put that on the outside because there's only one 5. You got to have 2 of the same thing to be able to make a whole number on the outside of your square root symbol. So the 5 stays on the inside. Now this isn't 22. When you have more than one number on the outside, you have to multiply them together and you get 4 square root 5, just like we did over here. So it's a little bit more work, but it breaks it down in a simpler term. So whichever way is easier for you, you can do it, doesn't matter, as long as you understand that the square root of 80 is 4 square root of 5. So with that being said, let's go back to our problem here, and we'll break down the square root of 80 into 4 square root 5. So now we have negative 8 plus or minus 4 square root 5 all over 8. Now, like I was saying yesterday, you can simplify the denominator with both whole numbers on the top, but it's got to go into both of them. So if that would have been, say, like 5 square root 5, you can't simplify this because 5 over 8 doesn't reduce. But since 4 and 8 reduces and 8 and 8 reduce, you can reduce these by dividing each one by 4. So negative 8 divided by 4 and 4 divided by 4 and the denominator 8 divided by 4. So you end up with negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 5 over 2. And as far as the homework is concerned for tonight, that would be your final answer. That would be sufficient. Now, if you're using a calculator or Desmos, it's going to take that a step further and give you two answers because it's going to say negative 2 plus the square root of 5. And the square root of 5 is just a little bit more than 2. So this would be a little bit more than 0 over 2. So you'd have a pretty small decimal, pretty small positive decimal. Now, if you subtract a little bit more than 2, negative 2 minus the square root of 5, now you're looking at negative 4 point a little bit. Divided by 2 would be like negative 2 point a little bit. So if you're using decimals with the calculator or Desmos, you should end up with a tiny positive decimal and a negative 4 point something. All right. So that's your lesson for today. That should help you get through the homework for tonight. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show.